Welcome to episode 2 of the BBTV podcast. Today we'll be talking about the British Super Welterweight mix, where they rank from top to bottom, what's next for Hughie Fury, and when will Chris Eubank Jr get his world title shot. For all this and more, stay tuned. Cheers, guys. How are we getting on, Greg?
Yeah, not bad. Cheers, George. Not bad. Enjoyed the last one, which was good. First one that we've done. And yeah, enjoyed it. It's nice, like I say, always to chat with you about boxing and what's, come and gone. And like I say, it's always good. I think, like I say, leaving it a couple of weeks to let a few things and a few topics come and go is always good. And we've got plenty that we can discuss over the last couple of weeks, haven't we?
Definitely. And I think, obviously, we're going to have a lot of different things on this podcast, but we've just had the news of Jake Paul against Tommy Fury. So we're just going to be talking about that for 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it's mad. I saw something from Jake Paul, actually. I thought fair play. How at first, everybody was really sceptical about it. And I say fair play, but, everyone was sceptical and he's ruining boxing, this, that, and the other. And he put something out on Twitter and he said, 6 months ago, Jake Paul's ruining boxing. Now, can I be on your undercard? You know what I mean? It's mad how it's turned around. And I say it's a good fight. I think it'll be really interesting. I think it does good numbers, definitely.
Yeah, I think less oxygen we give to that, the better. But yeah, it was interesting. I actually spoke to someone, pro boxer called Joe Giles the other day. He won the English national title at light heavyweight. The guy that he faced in the final actually beat Tommy Fury in the semis. So that was quite an interesting angle. But yeah, let's move on from that sharpish. I think we've got something pretty interesting. I think it'll spark a little bit of debate. We're going to run through the super welterweight division in terms of from British interest after the Fowler-Smith contest and all the various undercards associated with that. So what we'll do is we'll try and start at the top, finish at the bottom or bottom of what we see to be the contenders. And I think, Greg, you'll probably agree with me. Number one, got to be Liam Smith.
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody kind of got it so right, didn't they, about how they thought that fight would go. And it was interesting. It was intriguing. He did exactly what people said. He was expecting a war early. And it wasn't really a war. There were times when Fowler did well, but Smith's really tough. And he's been at that level. And yeah, got him out of there quite emphatically. I think Fowler looked as though he wanted to try and get back up again, but the towel went in. And yeah, I think it was at the time maybe a step up for Fowler. And I think Liam Smith's well within his right now to go and fight Jesse Vargas, whether that's in America or Liverpool. I think that's a good fight. I think that's a really good fight. And that'll see where Liam Smith really is on the world level. But yeah, kind of went the way I thought it would. But with Fowler, I don't want to say I know Eddie Earned did an interview and it's like, it's whether his career's on the line or Smith's or whoever's. And we'll come on to the other super welterweights or light middleweights, however we want to, call the weight class. But I think Anthony Fowler will always be at that level, especially in interesting fights. Ted Cheeseman fight, Fitzgerald rematch. He could fight JJ Metcalf. He could fight Kieran Conway. So I think, but Anthony Fowler put something really interesting up on, I think it was Twitter or Instagram, and he'd gone up to super middleweight, but he'd not put an ounce of fat on. And you think, if he fought at middleweight, could he carry the power there? And I'd like to see him carry on at light middle because I want to see the Fitzgerald rematch more than anything. I thought that was a really good fight. And both at the level that they were at the time, both similar. So that'd be one. But yeah, it was an interesting fight. And it went the way that I thought it would, to be fair, with Liam Smith getting the stoppage.
Yeah, I think Fowler said as much. He's not going to fight at super welter again. Like, as you said, I saw that tweet too. And yeah, I agree. Any of those contests, any of those matchups would be pretty interesting. I still think you probably give, a man that we will discuss shortly, probably Troy Williamson, a decent fight as well. But yeah, I think we've probably seen the end of Anthony Fowler at British super welterweight level. I think it'll be middleweight realistically. I can't see him jumping up twice, but Yeah, no, I think that'll be really interesting. But in terms of Liam Smith, I think I agree with you that Jesse Vargas is a really interesting fight. I think what they'll hope to do, Eddie Hearn and Liam, will be to obviously win that and set up a potential one last big world title shot against maybe Jamal Charlo, Brian Carlos Castano, someone like that. I know he's ranked, Liam Smith's ranked 5th in the WBA at the moment, I think. No, sorry, 5th in the WBO, which is obviously Brian Carlos Castano's belt. So I think we'll probably see 2-3 more fights from Smith. I think if he doesn't win the Vargas one, that's probably the last we'll see of him. But I think we saw against Fowler that he's got a lot to offer, left to offer. But as far as he's concerned, he's only interested in offering it on world or, probably world level, really, realistically. I don't think he'd be that up for a European fight either. So,
yeah, no, I agree. And I think as well that European fight against a level of, let's say, Garcia, who fought Ted Cheeseman or somebody like that, it's the fear of potentially getting beat, isn't it, at that level? So he's done that really with the Fowler fight, emphatically, really, got the stoppage, did what he needed to do and did it well. And I mean, he's been with the WBO, I think, for quite a while when he won the world title and then he fought, was it Munguia? I think he fought Jamie Munguia as well, didn't he? And that went the distance. So I think the fight that they may look at, like say, if he beats Vargas, and that would push him up to, because I think Vargas, where he's got to look at it and think, well, what other avenues have I got? That's a good fight. The pair of them, I think, at a level, I think Liam Smith's got a chance in that fight. I think it's really quite a 50-50 fight. And it suits them both, whether it's here in Liverpool again. I think a lot of the Liverpool fight fans really enjoyed that night, because I thought it was a brilliant card. So they might come out for him again if they stack the card as well. But he has always been with the WBO. So again, he could be looking, like you say, at the Castano fight. But then Castano and Charlo had that great undisputed fight that was a draw. So they might be looking at that. So you might be right. If he beats Vargas, he might have another one after that. And he might try and become mandatory for the WBO. But the biggest fight for him there is the Charlo fight in America. So, big money for that. And the opportunity to become undisputed. So very interesting for Liam Smith getting that victory. Obviously the fight in Russia that didn't go his way, you always kind of think, where's he going to go next? But he did exactly what he needed to do. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the Vargas fight. I think that is an interesting fight at this moment in time for the pair of them.
Yeah, I found it quite funny that the Russian turned up, didn't he, to Liverpool? Can't remember what it's like, Merganov or
Mergan, yeah. Did he turn up to Liverpool?
He was ringside, and he went to Eddie Hearn. Oh, when are you going to call me up to, talk about the rematch? And they said, oh, well, yeah, we're not interested in the rematch at all. I think as far as Smith's concerned, he won that fight. He's not going back to Russia. Merganov's not a big enough name to come back here, so that chapter's over. But yeah, found that quite funny that he bought a ticket, came over, no one knew about it, and then just turned up ringside. He's had a fight announced the last couple of days. He's fighting someone in Russia again, and yeah, we'll see. He likes to think that he's a avoided fighter, but I think it's just no one wants another stitch up, do they?
That's it. And you've got to have some brass neck to come over to Liverpool and sit ringside. But at the end of the day, I think they wanted to, that was a fight that they were looking at before the Fowler-Smith fight, wasn't it? But I think he said he wasn't ready or this, that and the other. So you can't kind of then come. Liam Smith won that fight. But the Russian lads got the decision on paper. And then he's coming back over cap in hand to Liverpool like, oh, can we do the rematch? It's not going to happen, is it? So if it was a close fight, then you could understand it. But there's no way Liam Smith's going to go back over to Russia again. So, yeah, you're dead right. I think that chapter's done and dusted. Liam Smith did what he needed to do. But that Russian fighter's probably come over and thought, look at this for an event. The Liverpool fans, it was a really, and we'll get into it, obviously, because it was super welterweight stacked card. The event in the fight night itself, I thought, was one of the best that we've seen, really, from Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, regular fight night for a long time. Really, really good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they showed themselves a bit of a level above what the other options that we've seen so far from Sky Sports Boxer, Queensbury, etc. But yeah, I think one man who maybe debatably caused the biggest upset of the night was probably Troy Williamson. But I mean, I remember watching that fight, and thinking this is really, really close. And I've watched it back since, and I think actually, in a way, it was actually a bit more comfortable for Troy Williamson than maybe it looked on paper. I think that was just because we always thought that Cheeseman would eventually find a way, but turned out to be opposite, didn't it?
Yeah, I think credit to both of them. The first thing, obviously, credit to Troy Williamson for getting that stoppage, because it's similar. I've always put Cheeseman and Eggington similar together. Like, you could have a round where, and I think we've said it before, you could give someone a cricket bat, be like, right, try and knock him out. You won't be able to. He's so tough, you know. But credit to Troy Williamson for stopping him. You know, never been stopped. Been beaten, but never been stopped. And that was a vicious knockout. And I very rarely say it, but it was coming. You could see it just before he got stopped. You could see it coming. He got rocked, and the way his neck went back, and it was a tough knockout, and it was tough to watch because he's been in such tough fights. So credit to Troy Williamson for the victory. But Ted Cheeseman doesn't take easy fights, you know, and that's why I think it does catch up with him. He's 26. He's been in such wars, and he is so tough. So it'd be interesting to see what will happen with Ted next. But I really like Cheeseman. I think he's valuable. But credit to Troy Williamson. He just looked. He looked like Cheeseman in the Metcalf fight. Fit, game, take a punch, give it straight back, give it back with venom. There were times when Cheeseman looked as though he had him hurt, but Troy Williamson's ability to recuperate and regroup and refocus and use the time to recover in between rounds in the corner. He just looked so fit. He looked so fit, and similar to how Ted looked against Eggington or, you know, against Metcalf. And he came in with that underdog mentality, and he got him out of there emphatically. So that's why, for me, the super welterweight division is one of the best domestically, because the depth of talent in there is just so vast. But yeah, really good fight. And again, a tough knockout to watch, really, because you don't really see that happen to Ted Cheese. And when you do, you sit there and you think, how much longer can he carry on doing that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you're also a bit kind of struggling for matchups with him. I know we could see a lot of, you'd watch Cheeseman Fitzgerald again, you'd watch Cheeseman Metcalf, but it's more, I don't mean it's the sort of direction that Cheeseman probably thought that he was heading. Yeah, I don't know. I've watched it back and I've kind of felt a bit sorry for him in a way, because, yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure how much more punishment he can take or how much you kind of actually want to see it, to be honest. But yeah, I really hope that he regroups and he finds some good matchups. But I mean, he's had such a busy career so far that, I mean, he's fought them all. He's fought most of them already, and he's only 26, as you say. But yeah, I think Troy Williamson, just final one on that, was we kind of underestimate him because he did have quite a decent, prolonged amateur career, but he was on the wrong side of defeats to people like Anthony Fowler. His record as an amateur, I think, was, well, BoxRec shows it as 8 wins, 9 losses. Obviously, that's not all his amateur contests, but there were a lot of semi-final defeats to sort of big high-level boxers that you'd know and heard of. But yeah, I think he's just grown into a serious pro, and he's done it the hard way, really. And yeah, I'd like to see Williamson probably step back from British level and test himself against some European fighters, or some sort of an Austin Trout, or maybe Sergio Garcia. It might be a bit early for that, but test himself against a different sort of fighter that maybe will do him better in the long term for a potential world title.
Yeah, I know, I agree, mate, completely. And I think it's similar with Ted Cheeseman in that sense of when he fought Garcia, that jump was too much for him at the time. But he regrouped, got the victory, got the British title back. So he's taking that jump at the right time, like you say. But it is exactly that. You see some of these light middleweights where they get to a point and you think, when are they going to jump to world level? Get out of the domestic level, European level, jump to world. And you're exactly right. You've got fights there like Erislandy Lara, Julian Williams being another one who fought. I think he fought, was it on the Wilder Fury card, and he got beat. You know, fighters like that, where Austin Trout, again, like you say, who all have campaigned at light middleweight, and you think that would be such good experience for them in and around that level. And I think the big money fights as well. But like you say, such depth in that division. I love the division, and what you'll always see with them fighters is, and the loss doesn't define you at light middleweight for me. It's like seeing Cheeseman knows, and like I say, the credit's got to go to Troy Williamson. You're right. Let's see if he can get that Lara Trout fight, somebody like that. But one defeat, you look at Cheeseman, he could go and fight. He's got the Eggington rematch there. What a good fight that was. Any fear of him losing a fight is always going to be. People love to watch him. So I think, again, you could see the Eggington fight. And I'm saying this selfishly because he needs to really rest up and think about who he's going to fight next, or even if he does again, which I hope he does. But like you say, he's got the Eggington rematch there, the Fowler fight. There's all sorts of fights there for him. And again, even like Fitzgerald rematch, because Fitzgerald's come off, like say, a lengthy time away if Fitzgerald fights again. So just so interesting, the depth of it. That is, for me, my favourite division worldwide and domestically for sure.
Yeah, I think Eggington will be tied up for a little bit. It's a middleweight, isn't it, with the WBC?
Yes, he has been fighting middleweight, hasn't he? Yeah.
But yeah, that I think, saying that, Eggington's a guy who's been in a lot of wars as well. But Eggington seems that he's playing it pretty tactically to get in a mandatory position for a world title shot. So yeah, would you take the risk against Ted Cheeseman? I suppose if it was at light middle, it doesn't really matter. But definitely, I think that's a rematch that we will see somewhere down the line, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, like you say, he's fighting a middleweight, isn't he? He's won the WBC silver title. Imagine Eggington against Charlo, the middleweight, the WBC world title. It's mad, isn't it? But like you say, that's something he's going to try and go as high as he can, probably. And then there's always that demand for that rematch. I think it was so good. So even if like Eggington and Cheeseman, they're both in such good positions for me, because a lot people are so interested in the pair of them. They're in such good fights. But no matter what happens to the pair of them down the line, that fight's always there for them. So, yeah, be interesting. Be interesting to see what happens with them.
I think that kind of naturally follows on. So one option, obviously, is Kieran Conway, because obviously they drew their first fight. They're kind of on a similar level now that Conway's beaten JJ Metcalf, and I think, I think that's a fight that a lot of people would watch, and it's probably a fight which it's a kind of sideways doors fight, in that it's a big opportunity for both of them to springboard themselves back up towards that. Yeah, well, obviously we can see Cheeseman, a 3-time British champ, which you definitely wouldn't rule out. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think anyone who says that they can predict where Ted Cheeseman will be in 5 years, I think they're a pretty brave man, personally. Yeah,
I agree, mate. I agree. And it's like you say with Conway, mentioned to him really in the sense of he had the Cheeseman fight and that was a draw. And Conway kind of took the chance, and he's surprised everyone really. He took that. I think he was on a next gen card. That was. I'm certain it was a good fight. And he just carried on. Obviously, had the Sissoko fight on the undercard of Canelo, Billy Joe Saunders. And there must be times with Conway. I mean, he's worked hard, he's grafted. It must be a moment where he's pinching himself, going, "But what I've achieved already?" And there's still big fights there. Getting that Metcalf victory, because Metcalf's a solid super welterweight. He's tough. So credit to him as well. And that's why it's so in depth. I mean, Conway's coming off now, two losses this, obviously Cheeseman and now Conway. But again, if let's say you did Jesse Vargas against Liam Smith in Liverpool, let's say that fight happened, I don't think anyone would be disgruntled seeing Fowler and Metcalf. Two Liverpoolians going at it again on that card. You wouldn't begrudge them. It might not be the best. You might want to see Fowler and Cheeseman. But whether Cheeseman will take that fight next, I think Fowler will fight anyone. I think Metcalf will as well. So it's just the merry-go-round of light middleweight for me. There's such good fights there to be made. And again, with notable mention is Fitzgerald. I know Kell Brook, but I know he fought briefly at light middleweight. I know he wants to fight at welter, whether he fights Khan. Very interesting division, mate. Really, really like that division. It hops up all the time. So you just want to see one of. It's like the class of light middleweights from now. You want to see one of them just jump up and take that step, just above European level, and get them fights, like say against Trout, Williams, Lara, somebody like that. then they can say, yeah, we're here at world level and we're going to make a good stab at it.
Yeah, I just want to see where they sit at world level as well. I think it's all brilliant getting these like into British fights, and I think it's like brilliant schooling for all of them. I think they're learning a lot, but we want to see them kick on, as you say, at world level. But yeah, I suppose touching on Fitzgerald, where do you kind of rank him in the super welterweight mix?
I mean, after he beat Fowler, and that was, I think at the time, I really enjoyed that fight, and that was on the undercard of Smith Eggington. I couldn't believe it. I look back and I go, damn, that headline. That was, again, another good card in Liverpool. So Fitzgerald did everything that was required at the time. Beat Fowler, went and won the British title from Ted Cheeseman in Newcastle. But obviously, he's had his time off, and people overtake it. You know, now I personally think if he was to have another fight, another, 8-rounder, and then fight Fowler, I think Fowler would beat him now, just because of fitness and activity. And I think the schooling he's got against fighting somebody like Liam Smith, I think Fowler would probably beat Fitzgerald now. But as a fighter, I rate Fitzgerald. I think he's technically underrated. I think he's such a very good boxer. And if he got back into that mindset and that fitness regime and got himself down to light middleweight, but again, it's whether he could get back down to that weight class, isn't it, Jordan? You know, having so much time out the ring, you might see Fowler Fitzgerald at middleweight because his last fight was at super middleweight. So, but I do rate him, but it's hard to rate him now because of his inactivity. And I think if he does come back to anywhere near where he was, then he's right up there for me with Troy Williamson and Fitzgerald. Imagine that fight. That'd be, if he got himself to peak condition and he went in there for a 12-round fight with Troy Williamson, that's when Fitzgerald can say, right, give me the opportunity at that level, you know.
Yeah.
Tough one really, where he sits now.
Yeah, I think you can't really rank him really, but I think if you saw Fitzgerald Williamson, to me that screams out as a fight that would probably be in Newcastle, both heavily backed. I mean, they both bring a pretty raucous crowd. I think, yeah, it'd be a good one to watch or be in the crowd. You probably have to wear a helmet, but yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, so yeah, well, I think with Fitzgerald, the only thing that we kind of want is just that, you know, he gets healthy, he gets in a good mind place, he's just happy. And I think, yeah, if we see that, then I think we'll see him in some pretty exciting fights in the future. But yeah, can't really rank him at the moment. I agree. So you probably have JJ Metcalf. He's kind of the last of the contenders, but you put him in against any of those and he'd have a decent fight. Do you reckon?
I think so. I think he's tough. I mean, he got stopped by Cheeseman. And again, that was quite close leading up to the stoppage. Similar. The Metcalf-Cheeseman fight was very similar, in my opinion, to the Cheeseman-Williamson fight. Teetering, both in the fight, both game. Cheeseman caught him. And then it just comes down to, I mean, you look at Cheeseman in the Troy Williamson fight, and there were times where he did catch Troy Williamson and he looked as though he could have hurt him. But it's what takes it out of you as a fighter delivering that punishment. And it looked as though Cheeseman, ever so slightly in each round, and he's never really done that, just looked as though he was faltering. Not faltering, but he was losing energy quite quicker than we've ever seen. So he had a tough fight against Metcalf. So I think Metcalf is tough. The Conway-Metcalf fight, Conway obviously got the win. I think he did win that fight. It didn't catch fire as much as people would have thought it would. But yeah, I think Metcalf, again, you can't let losses, especially at light middleweight. I don't think losses define any fight. And I think you'd see Metcalf against, again, you could see Metcalf against Fitzgerald. You know, if he was coming back, seeing something like that, to see where Fitzgerald's at and if he can take a tough, you know, a punch. You know, because Metcalf can bang, and only because he's been, you know, he had a close fight against Cheeseman, obviously got stopped, and then he's had an average fight against Conway, but Conway's a good boxer as well. So I think that would be interesting to see. But yeah, I think they've all got a shout for being in further fights. As long as it is in and around the level that we should be at, I think Conway Metcalf was matched perfectly. Both come off losses against Sissoko and Cheeseman. They've been matched. Williamson was mandatory for the British title against Ted Cheeseman, perfectly matched. Fowler Fitzgerald, bit of a crossroads fight. I did think that Smith had the experience, but it was so intriguing. So I just think that as long as they're all matched like that, you're going to see, I think, really interesting fights consistently. And I think Metcalf's got a dog in that fight to say, I should be here and I should keep getting the opportunities. It's exciting and he's exciting.
Yeah. I think, super welterweight division is absolutely booming. But I suppose moving back onto last weekend, we saw the return of Hughie Fury. Obviously, BBTV had put out some really interesting interviews with Peter Fury on YouTube and also with Hughie and stuff. They've got a really good insight into that. But yeah, Hughie Fury obviously sort of dealt with Christian Hammer and he kind of accelerated into the fight and he retired. Well, he retired at the end of end of the fourth, he retired, but it was after a pretty concussive round from Hughie Fury. And he kind of just showed that he's just that level above Christian Hammer. And I appreciate that Hammer's lost kind of whenever he stepped up to world level, but it's a fight that Hughie Fury should have won, but I think he won with a level of ease, which is really quite encouraging. And I think he's now 27. Where do you think Hughie Fury sits in the heavyweight mix and where do you think he could potentially go in the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, it's unbelievable, really, because how old is Hughie Fury? Is he 24?
27, yeah.
27, right, okay. So, see, I keep thinking he's really, really... that's still young in the head, especially in the heavyweight division. But in his time, with Hughie Fury, when he fought Joseph Parker, I think he won that fight, but it was very close. And people don't sometimes like the way that Hughie Fury fought, especially when he did back then, very tactical, hit and not get hit. But credit to Hughie Fury, he's never been stopped and he's been in good fight. He's fought Parker, Pulev and Povetkin. In and around them times, they were all world operators. And he's been in with the likes of them. So I think he's got to have that credit. For me, I don't think he's broke into the top 10 just yet. But he's got the result against Hammer. And like you say, he got the stoppage. Hammer's tough. Hammer's a tough heavyweight. He's not technically the best, but he is tough and he's tough to stop. But obviously, as you get older, he's getting older as well. So that stoppage might have been coming any time. So I think as long as Hughie Fury, but you've got to give him credit. He's fought Marius Vac, he's fought Hammer, he's fought people in and around that level where I think he is that level above Hammer and Vac. So a fight that I think would be interesting for Hughie Fury now, I think he'll probably go down the WBO route. An interesting fight for Hughie Fury would be somebody like Otto Welling, somebody like Robert Helenius, who've had good victories and who are quite ranked. And if you look at them and think, well, let's jump up from Marius Vac and Hammer to that level. And then if you can get through them, then you can start looking again with a rematch against Parker. I don't think anybody would be disgruntled at seeing Hughie Fury jump in with someone like Chisora. I think Fury could win that fight because he's well known. He needs a bit of a name, I think. And that'll come probably after the Otto Welling or the Helenius fight. Even like I say, Adam Kaunaki's been stopped twice now. So somebody like that, somebody who's on a bit of a streak, somebody who, I know Otto Welling isn't necessarily, but somebody who's in and around that level, who's given tough fights and who is tough. I think that would be interesting for him. Something along that level, just to step up from where he is now before he goes and says, right, I'm going to jump in with Parker, Joe Joyce, Del Boy, people like that. I think if he has that level before, then I think it'd be interesting. I think you'd be able to see that on Sky. I think what Welling, Helenius would fight on a boxer card.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because Fury, I think he's ranked 4th in the WBA, which is obviously U6 belt, regular champs Trevor Bryan. Yeah. Then you've got I can't work out why, but do you want to guess who's ranked number 1? He's a British fighter.
Dubois,
yeah. In
the WBA?
Yeah.
Yeah. He won that gold title, didn't he, against Bogdan Dinu, and then he's just elevated up and it's like, mental, really.
You got, Dubois 1, Michael Hunter 2, Robert Helenius 3, Hughie Fury, then Anthony Joshua, which I find funny, but... that's bizarre.
Yeah, Hughie Fury against, who was that? Was it Hellenius? Was it? Who's in at number 3?
I think that's a good matchup, that.
I think that'd be, again, keep pushing, and then you could get. I think Hughie Fury, that would be something. Robert Hellenius, Trevor Bryan, and then that's when you state your claim then and say, right, I want to be mandatory for the WBA, whether that's Joshua or Usyk, because then he's got his opportunity. And I genuinely believe he could. I think he has a great chance against Hellenius. I think Hellenius just had Kaunaki's number. I think Hellenius is quite slow and quite. If he catches you, you're gonna feel it. But I think Fury. I think Hughie Fury wins that fight. I think he beats Trevor Bryan, and I think a lot of heavyweights beat Trevor Bryan. And then, yeah, get the opportunity for a world title. And I think that's something he's stuck at it. You know, he's grafting, he's, you know, crafting his trade. I think he's well within his right then to say, yeah, give me the big fight for the WBA title.
And what do you think if you're offered the Michael Hunter fight?
Stay well away from him. Hunter's, no, I shouldn't say that. It depends what the money. If it's good money and if they can get that here, Hunter's really good. I was really hoping to see the Hunter Hrgovic fight, the IBF world title eliminator. Hunter's really good. And I think Hunter is very similar to how Hughie Fury was 4 years ago when he fought Parker. Very hard to catch, very hard to beat. His only loss has come against Usyk, and that was a decision at cruiserweight. And he's just gone up to, I think he gives anybody a tough night. I think he beat Povetkin on the Saudi Arabia card. He's just such a good boxer. And it's the fear for anybody. And this is the same as, like, I would say, I don't know if we'll go into it, but why Wallin? White's in a position now to fight the WBC mandatory title. So if he fights Wallin and he then loses and has to go through a rematch, then it's the fear of losing. I think White would win that fight. Same with Hughie Fury. If he beats Hellenius, beats Trevor Bryan, and before that he has to fight Hunter, it's the fear of, I feel like I could beat him, but what happens if I don't? So I think it's one of them. If you fight whoever's in front of you and get to a position, then do it. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to see it, but I can't see it happen. So,
yeah,
Hunter's very, very.
Yeah, I think the good thing about Hughie Fury is he's a free agent. He'll kind of fight on any promotion, so it'll be easy to match him against a whole host of different people. But yeah, I don't see the benefit. I don't think it's like a foregone conclusion that Hughie Fury would lose that fight. I think he could potentially beat Hunter, but I'm not sure there's much benefit. Rewards really there. But saying that, if it suddenly became a mandatory for the WBA 12 to 15 months down the line, you'd probably say take it. But yeah, right now it's not there. That was the sort of one of the main fights of the weekend. It was actually pretty heavily down on the undercard, but the chief act was Eubank Jr. against Vanik Avdian. I think I pronounced that right, the Armenian. Obviously made pretty light work of him. I thought he actually looked pretty impressive, Eubank Jr. I think he's definitely come on quite markedly since he started working with Roy Jones Jr. And yeah, I think he's quite an exciting fighter to watch. What was your take on that, Greg?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, you know, he's a level above that, so you would expect him. I mean, I thought he was a level above Marcus Morrison, and obviously went the distance with him. So you might look at that and think, oh, is he still got the power? Can he still stop people? But I think when he fought Marcus Morrison, getting the rounds was pretty good. Good decision. And then he did what he needed to do. He got the stoppage. And obviously it's what comes next. Now, the fight that everybody is saying that it's going to be, that his next fight will be Liam Williams, which I think is a good fight. I do think it is a good fight. Whether it's pay-per-view or not is another story. But I think that's not a bad fight, to be honest. And I think Liam Williams is tough, but I think the Andre fight would have taken a lot out of him, and his 2 fights with Liam Smith. So it's going to be interesting, really, to see how that fight goes and the wear and tear that Liam Williams has got on him. And Eubank Jr. isn't only a big puncher, but I say a big puncher, but he can box as well. He's not a bad boxer. Like you say, with Roy Jones Jr., he's seemingly coming on leaps and bounds and actually having a dedicated and a proper trainer in his corner, you know. So I think that would be an interesting fight to see next for Chris Eubank Jr. because it's levels, isn't it? You want to see him take them fights because they're talking about in 2022 in fighting the likes of Charlo and Golovkin. And he needs to take that step up to Liam Williams of the world and people like that to even just to get him slightly prepared. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, I think if he's going to fight anybody in and around the world champions next year, if he beats Liam Williams, would be like Murata or somebody like that, you know, or Andrade. I think that's a good fight. So it's the damage that Chris Eubank can take, really, you know.
He's willing to take those risks, though, isn't he? Which, I mean, it's great for us as fight fans. I think Liam Williams isn't the easiest fight. It's a fight that he's got to win if he wants to move on to world level, really. But he will be installed very soon as WBA mandatory. That's all tied up at the moment with Murata fight. I can't remember who. Can you remember who he's fighting, Greg?
I think that they were hoping to do the fight in Japan against Golovkin.
28th of December. In theory, they've agreed to fight. Murata, Golovkin.
Really?
So that's obviously, that does put Eubank Jr. in kind of a bit of a, you can see why he's taken on a Liam Williams fight, isn't he? I mean, he was going to fight one of those two. Even though I don't think he's actually ranked in the IBF, it would just be a case of Golovkin wanting to fight him, which he may well do. I'm not sure Eubank Jr. is as big a pull as he thinks he is, though. He kind of puts himself in that bracket of that Canelo, Triple G. I don't think we've ever really seen any evidence to back that up, but yeah, it's an exciting time for him. And to be honest, I would like to see him win a world title, a proper one. I know he claims on the IBO, because I just think it would show the class of people like George Groves and Billy Joe Saunders. I think we kind of underappreciate just how good they were. I think they're all very worthy world champions.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. I think I agree completely with what you say about is he as a big draw as people think. In this country, I think he is. Like one of my mates who isn't a massive boxing fan, he always tunes into watch him. I think it's the name as well, isn't it? I think he is in exciting fights, to be fair. I think, like you say, losing to Billy Joe and George Groves, again, I agree with that again completely. They're good fighters, really good fighters at the time in their weight class. Billy Joe Saunders has gone on to be a two-weight world champion, fight Canelo. George Groves won the world title, been in with Froch twice, been in with Badu Jack. The company that them two fighters have been with have just gone to show how good they are. And again, Eubank put up a solid performance against them both. I think the Groves win was more solid than the Billy Joe fight. I think the Billy Joe fight was closer than the Groves fight. I think Groves was exceptional that night. So I agree. But it's then when you take that step up against, I mean, at the time when he was met by Golovkin and Kell Brooks stepped in, probably the best decision Chris Eubank Jr. ever did, losing his pen, because Golovkin at that time was an absolute killer. And it's as if he's kind of gone under the radar now, Golovkin, because he's had a defeat against Canelo and had a tough fight against Derevyanchenko. But I do think Eubank, if he goes up against world level opposition, I'm talking Canelo, Golovkin, Charlo, and even Andrade, because Andrade's really tricky. I think if he goes up against them four, that's when I think you might see him really have an emphatic defeat. I genuinely think so. But it'd be good to see him get that fight, one of them.
Yeah, I think realistically, you'd expect Triple G to beat Murata. I mean, Murata's lost to Hassan and Dam, Rob Brandt. I know he beat them both in the rematches, but it's not the sort of level of fighter or just level full stop that Triple G's fought at. I know he's older, but we haven't really seen him slowing down too much, or as much as I think people say. But yeah, I think Eubank Jr. is going to have to win a really tough fight if he wins a world title. And yeah, I agree that I wouldn't say he'd be exposed, but he'll find it tough against all those names that you've just said. But if he does, he'll have done it the hard way. And to be honest, I like him a lot. I know he's not a very popular bloke generally, but I think if you just look at his record, who he's fought, the wars that he's been in, I think he's clearly he's been through it all, and obviously he's had his personal sort of heartbreak recently. But yeah, I think I will be rooting for him. But yeah, I agree with you. Very tough task. But yeah, I think, Greg, that's probably it for today on the BBTV podcast. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
That was episode 2 of the BBTV podcast. Thanks for tuning in. For the latest news, views and predictions from the world of boxing, stay tuned for our next episode in 2 weeks' time.